The house was decorated with blue balloons and paper streamers that caught the afternoon light. I could hear music playing inside, the cheerful, bouncy kind they put on for young children, and underneath it I could hear my grandson laughing. Owen, 4 years old that day, with his father's eyes and a laugh that started in his whole body before it reached his mouth. I was standing on the front step holding a wrapped gift. The paper was dark blue with small white stars on it because Owen had told me at Christmas that stars were his favorite thing. I had tied a yellow ribbon around it because he also liked yellow. The door opened before I could knock. My daughter-in-law, Priscilla, filled the frame. She was dressed carefully, the way she always dressed when she was expecting people she wanted to impress. She looked at me. Then she looked at the gift. Then she looked past me at the street, where 2 cars had just pulled up with other guests arriving. She stepped slightly forward and lowered her voice. Not so low that the people coming up the walk behind me couldn't hear the shape of it. She said this party was for her professional friends. Colleagues from the hospital where she was completing her residency. People whose opinion mattered to her career. She looked at my coat, which was clean and pressed but not expensive. She said my situation would be embarrassing. She said my cheap clothes and dollar store gifts did not belong at a party with doctors. Behind her, I could see my son William standing in the hallway. He said nothing. The door closed. I stood on the step for a moment. Just a moment. The 2 guests who had been walking up behind me had heard enough to understand what had happened. I could feel their careful, sideways attention without looking at them directly. I turned and walked back down the path to the street. I kept my pace steady. I kept my shoulders straight. I had learned a long time ago that dignity was not something other people could take from you unless you handed it over, and I had no intention of doing that on a Saturday afternoon on a street lined with blue balloons. I got into my car and sat in the driver's seat with the gift on my lap. The yellow ribbon had come slightly loose on one side. I straightened it carefully. Through the windshield, I watched other guests arriving. They were dressed well. They carried bakery boxes and bottle bags. They went up the path and the door opened for them easily, warmly, with the particular welcome Priscilla gave to people she considered worth welcoming. The music inside the house continued. I could still hear Owen laughing faintly through the closed windows. I sat with the gift on my lap and breathed slowly. Then my phone buzzed on the seat beside me. I looked at the screen. It was a calendar reminder from my lawyer, a man named Gerald Oates, who had managed my private financial arrangements for 11 years. The reminder said, tuition transfer confirmation due. Respond by Friday. The reminder was specific. It referenced the scholarship account that Gerald managed on my behalf through a foundation structure we had set up years earlier. The foundation was named simply after a street I had lived on as a young man. It had no obvious connection to me. That had been the point. The payment due was the tuition installment for Priscilla's 3rd year of medical residency program fees at the university. The amount was significant. It covered the full semester's tuition plus the associated academic fees. It was the same amount Gerald had transferred, on my instruction, every semester for the past 4 years. She had no idea where the money came from. The scholarship had been set up to appear entirely anonymous. The foundation made the payments through the university's financial aid office. The university knew only that the funds came from a private benefactor who had requested complete confidentiality. They honored that request, as universities do with large private donors, without question or comment. Priscilla had received a formal scholarship award letter 4 years ago. She had called it life-changing. I remembered sitting in my small kitchen reading a text from William that evening, describing how excited and relieved she was. He had said she kept saying she couldn't believe someone believed in her that much. I had read that text and felt something warm and uncomplicated. That was 4 years ago. Now I was sitting outside her son's birthday party in a car she wouldn't let me park in her driveway. The reminder glowed on my phone screen. Respond by Friday. The arrangement had started because of a conversation I overheard by accident. It was 5 years ago, at a family dinner at William's apartment. I had arrived early and let myself in with the spare key he had given me. William was still getting ready. Priscilla was in the kitchen on her phone, and I was in the hallway when I heard her talking to someone, a friend from her program, about the tuition bill. She wasn't complaining dramatically. She was speaking in the quiet, matter-of-fact tone of someone who has already done the math several times and the math keeps coming out the same wrong way. She talked about the loan balance. She talked about the interest rate. She talked about how long it would take to pay back, and how that debt would shape every financial decision she and William made for the first decade of their marriage. I stood in the hallway and listened. I had the money. I had been careful with it my entire life. I lived simply, not because I had to but because I had never needed much. My needs were small. My savings were not. I did not want her to know it came from me. I knew enough about Priscilla to understand that a gift from me would not be received as simply a gift. There would be obligation attached to it that would complicate things. I wanted her to have the freedom without the complication. So I called Gerald the following week. He set up the foundation account within 30 days. I remembered the night she found out about the scholarship with a clarity that had only gotten sharper over the years. William called me on a Tuesday evening, speaking quickly, full of the particular energy that comes when something has happened that seems too good to be entirely real. He said Priscilla had received a formal letter from the university that afternoon. A full academic scholarship from a private foundation. Anonymous donor. Covering her remaining tuition in full. He said she was crying. He said she kept saying she couldn't believe it. I told him that was wonderful news. I told him to give her my congratulations. 3 hours later, William sent me a photo. Priscilla was sitting at the kitchen table with the scholarship letter in front of her, and she was smiling in the open, unguarded way that people smile when something genuinely good has happened to them. Her eyes were bright. She looked like someone who had just been told that a weight she had been carrying for years had been lifted. That photo stayed in my phone for a long time. That same evening, William mentioned in passing that Priscilla had commented on the sweater I had worn to the previous Sunday dinner. She had said, to William, not to me, that she didn't understand why I didn't make more of an effort with my appearance given that I had plenty of time on my hands. I had read that and set my phone down. I had not thought about it for long. I had just continued with what I was doing. 6. The comments had started early in their marriage and had grown more defined as the years passed. They were never said directly to me, at least not at first. They came through William, shaped as observations or concerns. Priscilla had mentioned that my apartment made her uncomfortable when they visited. Priscilla had noticed that I always brought the same kind of simple food to family gatherings. Priscilla had wondered aloud whether I was managing my finances properly since I never seemed to upgrade anything. William passed these things along with the careful, apologetic tone of a man who did not fully agree but also did not fully disagree. He was not a weak person. He was a person who had found the path of least resistance in his marriage and had stayed on it long enough that stepping off it had started to feel impossible. I had watched this happen gradually and I had not said much about it because saying much would not have helped. Priscilla did not respond to confrontation by reconsidering. She responded by consolidating. Instead, I had stayed present. I had shown up for dinners and holidays and the occasional weekend visit. I had brought simple food and modest gifts and I had sat in their living room and watched Owen grow from a newborn into a 4-year-old who ran toward me every time I walked through the door. Until today. When the door had not opened. I sat in my car and looked at the scholarship reminder on my phone screen. I thought about 4 years of payments made in quiet, consistent faith. Then I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table with the gift in front of me and looked at it for a while before I unwrapped it. The ribbon came off easily. The star paper tore back carefully, the way I had learned to open things from my own mother, who believed wrapping paper was worth saving. Underneath it was a wooden train set. Not a new one from a store. I had found it at an estate sale 3 months earlier, a handmade set from the 1970s, crafted from solid hardwood with real metal axles and small carved details on each car that you could only see if you held them close. I had spent 6 weeks restoring it. Sanding down the rough patches. Repainting each car in the original colors, which I had researched. Replacing 2 wheels that had gone missing. Applying a clear protective coat so that it would last another 50 years if treated well. Owen loved trains. He had loved them since he was 2. Every time I visited, he would pull me toward his toy shelf and show me the small plastic engine he kept there. Once, he had fallen asleep holding it. I had made this for him with 6 weeks of careful evenings. I set it on the table and looked at it. Priscilla had said dollar store gifts. She had not seen what was inside. She had not asked. She had looked at the wrapping paper and made her judgment from there. I sat with that for a while. Then I thought about something that hurt more than the insult. She had not just banned me from her party. She had banned me from Owen's memory of his 4th birthday. Gerald called me the following morning. He called every time a major payment was approaching, both to confirm my instructions and because he was the kind of lawyer who believed that large financial decisions should never happen without a direct conversation. He asked how I was. I told him I was fine. He said he was calling about the tuition transfer confirmation for the upcoming semester. He said everything on the university's end was in order and that he just needed my go-ahead to release the funds from the foundation account. He asked if everything should proceed as usual. I was quiet for a moment. Gerald had been my lawyer for 11 years. He had handled my husband's estate after Raymond passed away. He had set up the foundation. He had managed every transfer, every confirmation, every piece of correspondence between the foundation and the university. He knew the complete picture of what I had been doing and why. He also knew, because I had told him things over the years in the straightforward way that you tell things to someone you trust completely, about the pattern of treatment I had experienced from Priscilla. I told him what had happened at the birthday party. I described the front step and the lowered voice and the door closing. I described William standing silently in the hallway behind her. Gerald listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was sorry that had happened. Then he asked if I wanted him to proceed with the transfer. I told Gerald I wasn't sure yet. He said he understood. He said there was no immediate urgency. The payment confirmation wasn't due until Friday, which meant I had several days to consider. He was careful about how he raised the next part. Gerald was always careful. It was one of the things I valued most about him. He never pushed. He laid out information and let me work with it. He said I should know, in case I was uncertain about my options, that the scholarship agreement was structured as a renewable commitment. It was not a lump sum that had already been delivered in full. Each semester was confirmed individually, which meant each semester was also a decision point. The university understood this, as did the foundation terms. He said that stopping the payments would not involve breaking any agreement. The scholarship had always been renewable at the donor's discretion. He said he wanted to make sure I understood that clearly. I said I did. He asked if I had any questions. I said not yet. He said to call him before Friday. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in my kitchen with the restored train set on the table in front of me and thought about the word discretion. About what it meant to give something freely and completely and quietly for 4 years to someone who did not know where it came from and who had, on a Saturday afternoon, stood in a doorway and told me I did not belong. I thought about that for a long time. The next tuition payment would cover the entire upcoming semester of Priscilla's residency program fees. Gerald had sent me the breakdown in a document he attached to a previous email. I had read it when it arrived and filed it without dwelling on the number, the way I had learned to handle the financial side of this arrangement. I did not want the money to feel like leverage. I had never wanted it to feel like that. But sitting in my kitchen on the day after the birthday party, I thought about what that payment represented in practical terms. It was not a small amount. Without it, Priscilla would receive a bill from the university's financial aid office informing her that her scholarship funds had not been confirmed for the upcoming semester. She would then be responsible for the full tuition amount out of pocket or through a loan she would need to arrange quickly. Medical school fees at that level were not the kind of thing you absorbed comfortably on short notice. Gerald had not told me to stop the payment. He had not suggested I use it as a tool. He had simply made sure I understood that the choice was mine to make, as it had always been, each semester, every time. I looked at my phone. I thought about 4 years of quiet faith. I thought about a door closing in my face while my grandson laughed somewhere inside the house. I told myself to think carefully. I told myself not to decide anything while I was still in the part of the feeling that was raw. Then I called Gerald back and told him to delay the confirmation until I gave him the word. William texted me that evening. The message was short. He said he hoped I understood that what happened at the party had not been meant to be hurtful. He said Priscilla had worked very hard to build her professional reputation and that the guest list for the party was connected to people from the hospital and that she just wanted everything to go smoothly. He said I should have respected her wishes. He said he hoped I wasn't going to make things difficult. I read the message twice. Then I read it a third time because I wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly. He was asking me not to cause trouble. He was framing what Priscilla had done as a reasonable professional decision and framing my response to it as a potential problem. I set the phone down. I thought about William as a boy. About the person he had been before he had learned to disappear inside other people's certainties. He had been curious and kind and funny in a dry, understated way. He had been the kind of child who noticed things. Who brought me flowers he picked from the neighbor's garden and presented them with a formality that was both ridiculous and completely sincere. I did not know when he had stopped noticing things. I did not respond to the text that evening. I looked at the train set on my kitchen table and thought about Owen's laugh and thought about everything William had no idea I had been doing for his family for 4 years. He had no idea at all. The confirmation email from the university arrived on Wednesday morning. It was addressed to the foundation account, forwarded to Gerald, who forwarded it to me as he always did. The email was formal and courteous, as university communications always were. It confirmed the scholarship renewal period, outlined the payment schedule for the upcoming semester, and indicated that the foundation's confirmation of funding was expected before the Friday deadline to ensure uninterrupted enrollment status for the recipient. Uninterrupted enrollment status. I read that phrase and sat with it. Then I wrote back to Gerald and told him to delay. Not to stop. Not to cancel. Just to delay. I wanted to see what happened when the expected confirmation did not arrive on schedule. I wanted to understand what Priscilla would do when the invisible structure she had been standing on without knowing it was there suddenly shifted beneath her feet. Gerald wrote back within the hour. He said he understood. He said he would hold the confirmation and update me as information came in from the university end. He also said, gently and without any judgment in the words, that he thought I should think about what outcome I was hoping for. Not because delaying was wrong, but because knowing what I wanted from the situation would help me handle whatever came next with clarity. I appreciated that. Gerald was always useful that way. I told him I would think about it. I spent most of Wednesday doing exactly that. The first consequence arrived faster than I expected. Gerald called me on Thursday afternoon. He said he had received a communication from the university's financial aid office. They had sent a routine follow-up to the foundation contact, noting that the scholarship confirmation had not been received by the expected date and asking whether there had been any administrative delay on the donor's end. The office had also, as a standard protocol, contacted the scholarship recipient directly. They had sent Priscilla a message informing her that the renewal confirmation for her scholarship was currently outstanding and asking her to contact the financial aid office at her earliest convenience to discuss her enrollment status for the upcoming semester. Gerald said the tone of the university message was neutral and administrative. It was not alarming in its language. But the content was clear. The funding had not been confirmed. The recipient needed to engage with the financial office to understand what that meant for her. He said he expected she would contact the office quickly. He was right. Gerald told me she had called the financial aid office within 2 hours of receiving the message. He knew this because the university had looped in the foundation contact out of administrative courtesy, as they occasionally did when a scholarship involved an ongoing private arrangement. She had asked the office what was happening with her scholarship. She had asked whether it was going to continue. Gerald said she had sounded, by the office coordinator's account, quite worried. The financial aid office had told her what they could tell her, which was limited by the confidentiality agreement attached to the scholarship. They confirmed that the scholarship had been funded by a private anonymous benefactor for the past 4 years. They confirmed that the benefactor had requested full confidentiality and that the university was bound to honor that request. They confirmed that the scholarship was structured as a renewable arrangement renewed each semester at the benefactor's discretion. They confirmed that the current semester's renewal had not yet been confirmed. Gerald told me all of this on Thursday evening. He said the office had been professional and had not speculated about reasons for the delay. But Priscilla now knew several things she had not known clearly before. She knew the scholarship was not a permanent fixed award. She knew it depended on an ongoing decision made by a specific person who had been choosing, semester after semester, to continue it. She knew that person had stopped choosing, at least for now. And she knew she had no idea who that person was. Gerald said she had asked the office directly whether there was any way to contact the donor. The office had said no. He said she had also asked whether the scholarship had ever been in danger of stopping before. The office had said no. The confirmations had always arrived promptly. Until now. Gerald paused after telling me this. He said she had told my son that evening. That she needed to find out who the donor was. Gerald kept me informed as things developed over the following days, not through any inappropriate access but simply because the university's communications continued to copy the foundation contact on administrative matters, and because William, not yet knowing what he was walking into, called me on Friday to ask whether I knew anything about medical school scholarship structures. He asked it casually. He said Priscilla had received some confusing communication from her school about a funding delay, and he was trying to understand how these things worked. He said it was probably nothing. I told him I didn't know much about medical school scholarships offhand. He said okay and ended the call. On Saturday, Gerald told me that Priscilla had gone back to the financial aid office in person. She had asked more detailed questions. She had asked how long the scholarship had been funded. For years, they told her. She had asked how many payments had been made. Gerald did not know the exact answer the office gave, but it was the accurate number. She had asked whether the donor had ever communicated anything about her directly. The office had said the donor communicated only through the foundation account and had never specified reasons for the support beyond the standard scholarship criteria. She had asked whether other students received support from the same foundation. They had told her she was the only current recipient. Gerald said she had been quiet for a while after that. She was beginning to understand the shape of something she could not yet see clearly. The tuition deadline for the semester passed on the following Monday. Gerald had not released the funds. The scholarship was officially listed as pending renewal on Priscilla's university account. She had 2 weeks before the next administrative threshold, which was the point at which her enrollment status would move from active to conditionally held pending payment. William called me on Tuesday. His voice was different from the last time we had spoken. The casual, slightly managing tone he had used in our Friday conversation was gone. In its place was something that was trying to stay calm but wasn't entirely succeeding. He said that Priscilla was dealing with a situation at school. He said a scholarship she had been relying on had unexpectedly stopped confirming. He said they were trying to figure out what had happened. He said the amount involved was significant and that they were a bit worried. He said he knew I didn't have a lot of flexibility financially, and he felt strange asking, but he was wondering if there was anything I could do to help. He said it out of desperation. I could hear that. He had exhausted the options he considered more comfortable and had arrived at me as a last resort. I let him finish. I told him I was glad he called. I told him I thought I might know something about the scholarship. There was a pause on his end. He asked what I meant. I told him I thought we should all sit down and talk about it together. William was quiet for a moment after I said that. The silence had a particular texture to it, the texture of someone who has asked a question expecting a certain kind of answer and has received something else entirely, something that doesn't fit the category they had prepared. He asked me what I meant by knowing something about it. I told him that some things were better explained in person. I told him I wasn't trying to be mysterious. I just thought a face-to-face conversation would serve everyone better than a phone call. He asked if everything was okay. I told him everything was fine and that there was nothing to worry about. I told him to speak with Priscilla and find a time that worked for them both. He said he would. He called back within the hour. Priscilla had agreed to meet, though William said she seemed uncertain about what the meeting would involve. I could hear in his voice that he had told her I thought I knew something and that she had reacted with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Hope because the scholarship was her immediate problem. Skepticism because she did not believe I had access to information that could help with something at the level of her medical education. She was right that the person she thought I was would not have that information. She was wrong about who I was. We agreed on Thursday evening. Their house, 7 o'clock. I confirmed it with Gerald and told him to be available by phone in case I needed him. He said he would be. I arrived at their house on Thursday at 5 minutes to 7. William opened the door. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they have been managing anxiety for a week and are running low on the energy that anxiety requires. He thanked me for coming. He brought me through to the living room. Owen was already in bed, which I was sorry about. I had brought the train set with me in its box. I had decided that regardless of how the evening went, Owen was going to receive his birthday gift. Priscilla was in the living room when I came in. She was sitting on the edge of the sofa in the way that people sit when they are tense but are making an effort to appear composed. She was dressed casually, which was unusual for her in my presence. The stress of the past week had stripped some of the usual performance away. She said hello to me. She said it carefully, the way you say hello to someone when you are not certain what role they are about to play in something important. I said hello back. I sat in the armchair across from the sofa and put the gift box on the floor beside me. William sat next to Priscilla. She said she understood I might have some information about the scholarship situation. I said I did. She looked at me with an expression that was trying to be neutral but was betrayed by the tension in her hands, which were folded too tightly in her lap. I told her I wanted to start from the beginning. Priscilla listened with increasing difficulty as I described the shape of the situation without yet naming myself as the center of it. I said that someone had once overheard a private conversation. A conversation about tuition debt and financial pressure and the particular weight that medical school costs placed on a young person's future. I said this person had decided, based on that conversation, that the right thing to do was to help. Quietly. Without expecting anything in return. Without wanting acknowledgement. I said the person had set up a foundation account and arranged anonymous scholarship payments through the university's financial aid office. I said the arrangement had been running for 4 years, covering each semester's tuition in full, confirmed quietly at each renewal point without fanfare. Priscilla's hands had loosened slightly. She was leaning forward now. I said the person had never told anyone what they were doing. Not family. Not the recipient. Not anyone except the lawyer who handled the administrative side. She said it out loud before I framed it as a question. She said that person must have cared a great deal about her future. I said yes. I said they had. I asked her a question. I asked her what she thought a person like that might have expected in return for something given so freely and so quietly. She thought about it. William was watching me now with an expression that had moved from tired to something more alert. Priscilla said slowly that a person like that probably expected nothing. Just to help someone succeed. I nodded. Then I told her what that person had learned recently. I told them about the birthday party. I told it simply, without additional color, the way you describe something that happened when you want the facts to carry the weight rather than the emotion. I said I had arrived at the house. I said I had been holding a gift I had spent weeks making. I said the door had opened and I had been told I did not belong there because of my clothes and the kind of gift I had brought and the impression I would make on the professional guests inside. I said the door had closed. I said I had walked back to my car. I said that while I was sitting in the car, my phone had shown me a reminder about a tuition payment confirmation that was coming due. I let that land. William had gone very still. Priscilla was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the composed, slightly dismissive expression she usually carried around me. Something more uncertain. Something that was beginning to understand that the pieces of the evening were fitting together in a direction she had not anticipated. She had been complaining, just before I arrived, about an anonymous donor who had disappeared. A mysterious benefactor who had supported her for years and had inexplicably stopped confirming payments. She was sitting in the same room as that person. I let the silence hold for one more moment. Then I told them the truth. I said it plainly. I said that I was the person who had been paying Priscilla's medical school tuition for 4 years. That the foundation account was mine. That the scholarship was mine. That every semester confirmation, every renewal, every quiet transfer of funds through Gerald's office had come from me. I said I had arranged it anonymously because I had wanted her to have the freedom of the gift without the weight of obligation. I had not wanted her to feel indebted to me. I had not wanted the money to become part of the complicated territory between us. I had just wanted her to become the doctor she was working so hard to become. The room was completely silent. William looked at me for a long time without speaking. I watched him work through it. The sequence of years. The scholarship letter. The relief in Priscilla's face in that photograph he had sent me. The 4 years of semester confirmations. His mother, who he had occasionally updated on the financial pressures of their life, sitting in this armchair across from him having funded his wife's entire medical education without once asking for thanks. Priscilla had not moved. She was staring at me with an expression that I could not fully name. It was made up of several things happening at the same time: recognition, confusion, something that might have been the beginning of shame, and underneath all of it, the particular shock of someone who has suddenly seen a picture they have been looking at for years completely differently. She asked, very quietly, whether the payments would continue. I looked at her when she asked the question. I looked at her in the direct, unhurried way that I had learned over 63 years was the most honest way to look at another person. I told her I needed to say something first. I said that I had not delayed the scholarship confirmation as a punishment. I wanted to be clear about that. I was not a person who believed in using money to punish people. I had not set up the scholarship as a tool, and I did not intend to start treating it as one now. I said I had delayed it because I needed to think. Because something had happened that required me to sit with a difficult question. The question was not whether Priscilla deserved the support. She was a hard-working person who was building a genuinely valuable career and who would go on to help people in ways that mattered enormously. That had never been in doubt. The question was whether generosity and contempt could exist in the same relationship indefinitely without something eventually breaking. I said I had been willing, for years, to give without receiving anything in return. I had genuinely meant it that way. But there was a difference between giving without expectation of gratitude and giving while being told, explicitly, in front of other people, that I did not belong. William made a sound that was not quite a word. Priscilla put both hands over her face briefly. When she lowered them, her eyes were bright. She said she hadn't known. I said I understood that. I said that didn't change what had happened on the front step. William spoke next. He said her name once, quietly, and the way he said it contained 4 years of things he had chosen not to say in the moment and was now saying in a single syllable. Priscilla looked at him. Then she looked at me. She said she was sorry. She said the words carefully and without decoration, which made them more believable than if she had wrapped them in elaboration. She said she had treated me in ways she was not proud of and that she had told herself stories about why it was acceptable, and she understood now that none of those stories were true. She said she had been embarrassed by me in front of people she wanted to impress, and she had never stopped to ask herself what that said about her. I listened to all of it. William said he was sorry too. He said his silence had been its own kind of answer, and he had known that for a long time without doing anything about it. He said he had watched his mother be treated dismissively and had chosen the easier path, and he was ashamed of that. I looked at my son for a long moment. I told him that I understood how hard it was to stand between two people you loved. I told him I did not hold it permanently against him. I told him I needed something to change. Then I reached down and picked up the gift box from beside my chair and set it on the coffee table between us. I told them it was Owen's birthday present. I told them it was a restored wooden train set that had taken me 6 weeks to finish. William looked at the box. His face did something complicated. I explained the scholarship terms as they would go forward. I said Gerald would release the current semester's confirmation. The delay would be resolved and Priscilla's enrollment status would return to active with no lasting administrative consequence. I had already asked Gerald to prepare that confirmation, and he was ready to send it the moment I called him. I said the scholarship would continue. But I said the arrangement would no longer be anonymous. Not because I needed the recognition. I had functioned perfectly well without it for 4 years. But because continuing to give anonymously while the relationship between us remained as it had been would not serve anyone honestly. It would allow things to continue unchanged, and things needed to change. I said what I needed was not elaborate. I needed to be present in my grandson's life without negotiating for the right to be there. I needed to be treated as a person whose presence had value regardless of what I wore or what I brought or how my apartment compared to the apartments of Priscilla's colleagues. I said I was not asking for deference. I was asking for basic respect. Priscilla was quiet for a long moment. Then she said yes. She said it simply and she held eye contact when she said it, which I noticed. William reached across and put his hand on my arm. He said he was going to do better. I told him I believed him. I called Gerald from the living room. I told him to release the confirmation. He said he would send it immediately. The semester confirmation was released that Thursday evening and Priscilla's enrollment status was updated by the following Monday morning. She sent me a message on Saturday, separate from William, to say thank you. It was not a long message. It did not try to do too much. It just said she was grateful and that she intended to be worthy of it. I wrote back and said I was glad. The months that followed were different in ways that were small but real. The kind of difference that does not announce itself but is there every time you look for it. Priscilla called me once to ask my opinion about something, not about medicine or about finances, but about a decision she was making regarding Owen's schooling. She asked because, she said, she trusted my judgment. I gave her my honest opinion. She thanked me for it. William started calling more often. Not for specific reasons. Just to talk. We had not done that in years and starting again felt like finding something you had put away in a drawer and assumed was gone. Owen received the wooden train set on a Saturday afternoon 2 months after his birthday. We sat on the living room floor together and I showed him how the cars linked. He spent 45 minutes running the train along the edge of the rug, making the sound of an engine with great seriousness. When it was time for me to go, he ran at me with his full 4-year-old force and wrapped both arms around my legs. Priscilla was standing in the hallway watching. She said nothing, but she was smiling in a way that was not a performance. The person she had called too poor to belong at her table had been quietly funding her future all along. She knew that now. And knowing it had made her someone different.